Welcome to the Beau Show, the home of faith, family, and freedom. I'm sure that most of you have heard it by now, but Tucker Carlson's release of unseen footage of the January 6th Capitol breach has been an affront to the narrative that was presented by both the media and the Select Congressional Committee itself. It is calling much of the events of that day into question. Carlson was given access to over 40,000 hours of video and audio footage that was provided to him by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The new change in leadership in the House, as you can tell, has been very significant. McCarthy seems to want to get to the bottom of the origin of COVID. He wants to get to the bottom of free speech suppression in social media and its comfortable bedfellows in the government. And he also wants to get the full picture of January 6th, which Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has called the darkest day in American history since the Civil War. Some Democrats have compared it to Pearl Harbor and 9/11. But is that really the case? There are prisoners sitting indefinitely detained based upon what could be lacking evidence, and perhaps even exculpatory evidence. But our first question must be asked: why was this surveillance footage withheld? What purpose did it serve? Some said that it was withheld to protect the identities of various individuals. So were we told the truth about January 6th? Was it an insurrection? Did rally attendees breach their way into the Capitol to terrorize congressmen and take over the government in sedition? Did Capitol Police get overwhelmed? And if so, why? My colleagues at the Epoch Times did a great documentary about this called The Real Story of January 6th. It talks about the various methods the Capitol Police employed that day, such as firing explosives at point-blank range. It talks about the unnecessary death of Ashley Babbitt. But it asks the fundamental question we now are taking a look at more closely. Were we really told the truth? Was democracy really under siege that day? And if it was, who were the perpetrators? Is it more than meets the eye? One of the elements of this has to do with entrapment. Law enforcement cannot entice you to commit a crime and then arrest you for it. So if it is illegal to go in a particular place, like the Capitol, they can't say, hey, come on in, I'll unlock the doors for you, right this way, and then trap you and arrest you. So Carlson opened his show giving the bigger picture of the video footage.
Taken as a whole, the video record does not support the claim that January 6th was an insurrection. In fact, it demolishes that claim. And that's exactly why the Democratic Party and its allies in the media prevented you from seeing it. By controlling the images you were allowed to view from January 6th, they controlled how the public understood that day. They could lie about what happened, and you would never know the difference. Those lies had a purpose. They created a pretext for a federal crackdown on opponents of the Uniparty in Washington.
Our office wanted to ensure that there was shock and awe, that we could charge as many people as possible.
The first thing you notice from viewing the full video record of January 6th is just how many people entered the Capitol building that day. Hundreds and hundreds of people, possibly thousands, over the course of about 2 hours. The crowd was enormous. A small percentage of them were hooligans. They committed vandalism. You've seen their pictures again and again. But the overwhelming majority weren't. They were peaceful. They were orderly and meek. These were not insurrectionists. They were sightseers. Footage from inside the Capitol overturns the story you've heard about January 6th. Protesters queue up in neat little lines. They give each other tours outside the Speaker's office. They take cheerful selfies and they smile. They're not destroying the Capitol. They obviously revere the Capitol. They're there because they believe the election was stolen from them. They believe in the system. Here's the man you've heard referred to as the QAnon shaman outside the Senate chamber. These are not rioters. These are people who wandered over from a political rally.
We will not let them silence your voices.
After the rally, they walked down Pennsylvania Avenue, where organizers had secured a federal permit to hold a legal rally on the grounds of the Capitol.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Once at the Capitol building, things began to get chaotic. Capitol police officers fired tear gas into the crowd. A few at the front of the herd broke windows. Someone opened the doors, and many hundreds of others just walked in.
They're going to make that the story.
Of course, they did make it the story.
A great deal of focus of Tucker Carlson's release footage focuses on Jacob Chansley, the so-called QAnon shaman that wore Viking horns and face paint. His face was plastered all over media as a prime perpetrator, the face of J6, a part of the big lie, someone incited by Donald Trump's January 6th rally, for which Trump was impeached. Let's have a look at this new footage of Chansley inside the Capitol.
Jacob Chansley became the face of January 6th, a dangerous conspiracy theorist dressed in outlandish costume who led the violent insurrection to overthrow American democracy. For these crimes, Chansley was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison, far more time than many violent criminals now receive. What did Jacob Chansley do to receive this punishment? To this day, there is dispute over how Chansley got into the Capitol building. But according to our review of the internal surveillance video, it is very clear what happened once he got inside. Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides. Here's video of Chansley in the Senate chamber. Capitol Police officers take him to multiple entrances and even try to open locked doors for him. We counted at least 9 officers who were within touching distance of unarmed Jacob Chansley. Not one of them even tried to slow him down. Chansley understood that Capitol Police were his allies. Video shows him giving thanks for them in a prayer on the floor of the Senate. Watch.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving the inspiration needed to these police officers to allow us in this building.
Contrast the reality of what Jacob Chansley did in the Capitol building on January 6th, the indisputable facts recorded on video, some of which has never before been seen, with the depiction of Jacob Chansley that you've seen in the media for more than 2 years. He's a terrorist, they said. He should be killed.
Shoot him. Yeah. Shoot him. Like, you burst into the United States, if he was dressed like bin Laden, would you have shot him?
Shoot him. Shoot him. It makes you wonder, who are the violent extremists here? Not Jacob Chansley, and the video proves that. But you would never have known from the media coverage.
Now, as you saw, Chansley does not seem to be at odds with any law enforcement. In fact, quite the contrary. He seems to be being given a tour almost as they escort him around. If he has no right to be inside the Capitol during an insurrection as bad as the Civil War, why are police being so nonchalant about it? Is that the narrative that you had heard up to this point? Is this trick photography or is it CGI? Jacob Chansley was sentenced to 4 years in prison for his crimes. Narrative number 2 that is being upended is the story that Officer Brian Sicknick was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher by protesters. Take a look.
To this day, media accounts describe Sicknick as someone who was, quote, slain on January 6th. The video we reviewed proves that is a lie. Here is surveillance footage of Sicknick walking in the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by the mob outside. By all appearances, Sicknick is healthy and vigorous. He's wearing a helmet, so it's hard to imagine he was killed by a head injury. Whatever happened to Brian Sicknick was very obviously not the result of violence he suffered at the entrance to the Capitol. This tape overturns the single most powerful and politically useful lie the Democrats have told us about January 6th. And it was indeed a lie.
He seems to be in good health, well after the report by media that he had been killed. Narrative number 3 is this character Ray Epps, who said he would be leading an effort to breach the Capitol, but lied about his whereabouts. The J6 committee protected him and did not consider him an insurrectionist. Remember that protecting democracy was a huge talking point for Democrats in the midterms that we just had. Some voters were swayed by this idea that Democrats would protect our democracy and lunatic Trump supporters would be its demise. But you have to believe this narrative. And if you are Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, you continue to tell people that not only was January 6th a threat to democracy, but the release of these videos is also the same.
As reporting on the Dominion lawsuit shows, Mr. Carlson had no problem admitting behind the scenes that the big lie is pure garbage. When Sidney Powell went on the air to push the stolen election narrative, Mr. Carlson told fellow anchor Laura Ingraham that Sidney Powell is lying. His words by the deposition. Mr. Carlson's own producer texted him that, quote, "I don't think there is evidence of voter fraud that swung the election." They know full well they've been lying, and they're doing it anyway, especially to the memory of Brian Sicknick. Nonviolent? Ask the Sicknick family. It makes me sick just thinking about what his family must be going through this morning. And it's an insult to everyone who cares about our democracy and wishes to preserve the dream of our founders in our day, in our age. I hope every member of this chamber will call out Fox and Mr. Carlson for defending the insurrectionists. And again, I am disappointed and angered in Speaker McCarthy's decision to share sensitive security footage with Mr. Carlson.
Notice that Schumer did not dispute the video evidence. And the fact remains that his counterpart, Nancy Pelosi, had ultimate control over the Capitol Police presence on January 6th. But he just simply doesn't want Carlson and Fox to air more videos, which contradict the narrative his party, and even some members of the GOP, such as Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, have told you. So you see, Chucky doubles down on this destruction of democracy, when the irony is, it is he who threatens democracy by obfuscating video evidence from the American people and advocating for the suppression of freedom of the press. Do you see what he's doing here? Keep watching at epochtv.com/The Beau Show.